All right, the button has been pressed. The light has turned green. We did not immediately drop all the frames. So we are all set and ready to go for another episode of In Hindsight, the series where we talk about RPG systems and books of yesteryear. Today we're going to be covering the 4th Ed Dungeons & Dragons Dungeon Master's Guide and Monster Manual. I'm, as always, Bograt.
I'm Hunter Green.
And I'm Vincent. And to be a little bit more detailed than that, we're mainly covering the Dungeon Master's Guide and having a brief interruption for the Monster Manual because it's a Monster Manual.
Yeah, just kind of talking generally about the general monster categories. We're definitely not going monster by monster, especially because 90% of them are the same fucking thing.
Yeah, give or take. Not in a bad way in this particular case. If there's one thing I actually do like before, that it's the monster design, actually.
No, again, and we'll talk about it a little bit more as we get back there. But again, to me, it feels very similar in a prototypical way to what they ended up doing with actually the 2024 rules of 5th Ed, where they had to sort of have more baseline blocks that you can then sort of slot into whatever type of monster you need.
Yeah.
But we will get there as we get there. So
yeah, that is deeper in the book. Also, you may notice we're short too. They'll eventually show up. Don't worry about it. Or they've been here the whole time. One of the two. But yeah. There's a Dungeon Master's Guide for 4th edition, as there has been for every edition of D&D. Give or take every edition of D&D. Don't think about anything before 3rd edition. It gets really fucking complicated really fast.
I mean, 2nd Ed is fine.
No, just...
Did it have a DMG?
Huh?
Did it have a DMG?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Then.
Yeah, 2nd Ed had...
2, depending on whether you're talking about Dungeons & Dragons or Advanced Dungeons & Dragons.
I don't know, base Dungeons.
This is why Vince is saying don't think about anything before 3rd Ed.
Yeah.
Wait,
actually, the base ones I don't think had a Dungeon Master's Guides. The Advanced Dungeons & Dragons had Dungeon Master's.
There was not a Dungeon Master's Guide for Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition, but there was a separate book for game runners.
I'm going to let you know. I did not know that there was a difference between 2nd Ed and Advanced D&D.
When you hear people talk about 2nd Ed, they are almost always talking about Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition, which is different than Basic. Basic is actually what Dungeons & Dragons is called. We're not going to get too deep into the weeds on that. Oh, right, keyboard.
Yeah, keyboard also... Minor technical things. Could you move the sound thing down to make sure we're actually being heard? And then we're not just... Okay, good. Just making sure we're on the sound
look
thing.
At the still images.
Yeah, they'll certainly get everything across.
They'll figure it out.
All right, so moving on to our next slide. How to be a DM, the first chapter of this book. So yeah. First and foremost, obviously starts with the basic stuff. The odd thing about 5th edition is the basic assumed group size is 6 players, 5 characters, and 1 DM. Hypothetically, that's broken up into one leader.
One character of each role, essentially.
Usually, I think like 2 strikers and 1 of everything else, basically.
Yeah. As was pointed out, this is a little odd. Most games assume you have 4 players and the person running the game.
Including previous editions.
And 5th Ed.
And 5th Ed. Now, granted, that is rarely the case, and in some cases it goes down to 3, in some cases it goes up to like 10, and it's fucking insane to go up to 10, just break it into 2 groups of 5.
Or, 13 if you're Critical Role Campaign 4.
It's like 3 groups.
It is. It's actually spread across 3 tables in a West Marches style campaign. But
fair enough.
but it is 1 DM running a world and story for 13 players.
All at the same time, or is it like this group, then this group, then this group?
It is hard to tell because they pre-film, and so they've been showing 1 table at a time for story arcs. But my understanding is that they were playing in sort of a rotating schedule based on people's availabilities.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
But goes over the basic supplies you need. That really reflects the era of 2008. And since that's later than 2002, it now actually has optional mentions of things like laptops, personal digital assistants, digital cameras, and these newfangled, really expensive things called smartphones.
I'm also going to be perfectly honest with you. I fully disagree with the fact that snacks are listed as an addition. Snacks are required.
Yeah, snacks are technically listed as an addition. Yeah, I don't know. We tend to eat dinner beforehand, honestly. But
yes, but I've also I have been playing tabletop role playing games for more than 30 years, and I have never played without food in some fashion available.
I played in one table. It lasted one session. No one came back for it.
Yeah.
Gee, I wonder why.
Yeah, generally, if you're going to be sitting around for like, I don't know, 8 hours in the middle of the day, it's
Even if you're just doing a
or
4-hour
a
thing.
4-hour session.
You still want nuts or chips or something.
Something, yeah. Especially in the era. Yeah, I can understand at least some restrictions in the era where everyone is using like books, but in a digital era, it matters a lot less. Honestly, I'm not getting grease on your book because there isn't a book.
Yeah.
I'm getting grease on my own laptop or my phone.
Also, man, they were dedicated to selling those.
Yeah.
That's on a need to play, not a digital edition.
Well, again, we talked about it last time, is that the game was designed around the idea of taking a physical space. It wasn't really...
Yeah. You absolutely... This is not built for theater of the mind at all. You very much needed battle mat and miniatures. The game just ran a lot better.
It's one of those ones where if you had previous experience running other games, especially other versions of D&D, you could more easily get away with doing theater of the mind because you already had sort of the basis to build that off of. If this is your first time coming into a game and this is the system you have started to learn, you really do need minis and a battle mat because you just don't have that translation automatically in your head of like, oh, it's just like 5 feet. I can just say, oh, the guy's like 30 feet away from you, build that mental image. It just doesn't work as well with the way that the system is designed. Again, everything is measured in squares. Everything is designed in specific layouts of like effects, stuff like that.
Sometimes all you need is like a piece of flint, an M&M, Monopoly top hat.
A shit ton of miniatures to account for whatever monsters you're throwing at them that will almost never reflect the actual monster that you're throwing at them. Which is the other actual issue of like a physical tabletop is it's okay for like anything that's going, or it's easy enough to have a miniature for anything that's going to be there long term. Like player characters can get their own player character miniature if they're so inclined per se. But like when it comes to monsters, especially if you have a strong rotating cast of various things and they're in large numbers, this is more and more of a burden on the DM in order to actually have something that looks halfway proper.
Yep.
That is almost never met anyways, and is just like, okay, these goblins are really ogres, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, also other things in the initial section is D&D Insider. Their attempt to digitize the game #1. I think they're on number, 18, 19 at this point.
They've had a few runs at it. Technically speaking, what they have now is actually a straight evolution of D&D Insider as it was established in 4th ed. They never actually like fully replaced it. They just gradually upgraded the system and changed it around. Yeah. That being said, D&D Insider was actually really solid for what it was at the time. Like of attempts made for this kind of thing around the time, D&D Insider definitely was one of the best designed. It was also extremely easy to, if you had any sort of technical knowledge, essentially get a rip of and make your own local copy.
Yes, which is something you probably want to do anyways, because no one wants to. Okay, it's a pretty significant added expense.
Yeah,
especially if everyone has to have it at the table, and it's hard enough to ask a new player, or it's hard enough sometimes to just get a new player to play the game, let alone ask them to pitch in an additional expense in order to play it. If it's a game they haven't even tried before. And honestly, like, there are too many free digital tools to charge for it anymore nowadays. Yep. I mean, I kind of understand where they're coming from when it comes to trying to monetize D&D, because role-playing games in general, not just D&D, is kind of in a bad way when it comes to monetization with the internet. Books are very, very trivially easy to find on the internet. So any monetization basically is practically voluntary at this point when it comes to the players. So finding other avenues of actually gaining revenue, so you don't go bankrupt and everyone loses their job and goes out of business, is kind of a necessary thing. And yeah, I know this is Hasbro and no one has any sympathy for them, and rightly so. But
I know
There's
that
also other people who make RPGs, and they
Yeah.
are not Hasbro. They are normal people trying to, hopefully trying to make a living off of this or something. And it's just, it becomes hard for everyone, kind of.
Yeah, no, I won't spend money on D&D books anymore, but I definitely still do pick up stuff from smaller publishers, smaller developers, especially if they're like solo effort kind of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, D&D Insider as a whole was a resource online. At the very beginning, it started mostly as just a repository for sort of all, not only the actual like base book stuff, but also things that were like published. So throughout the history of D&D, stretching all the way back to early second edition, there were magazines, Dragon and for a while Dungeon, that had a lot of additional content and like optional rules, class variants, things like that. Um, Briefly touched on in 3.5 because we had the Dragon Magazine Compendium, which was quite literally a compendium of things that had been published in Dragon Magazine. Those actually, one of the big things that happened in fourth ed is those went digital and became part of D&D Insider. Now, a lot of the articles were still published for free, but everything that ever got published in Dragon Magazine got also added into D&D Insider, so you had access to the feats and classes and all that kind of stuff at a very quick reference. So that's what it started as, and it had a very rudimentary character builder as well.
Yeah.
One notable thing about D&D Insider in its earliest incarnation is that it was just a straight subscription fee. You just paid whatever the subscription fee was, and you had access to everything that was in D&D Insider. This covered all the rules, all the information, all the equipment, which is a difference to how the modern D&D Beyond operates, which is everything baseline is free, but that's all basically just the SRD core rules. And any additional stuff you have to pay for the digital version of the book to add into your D&D Beyond.
Yeah, which
Becomes prohibitively expensive very quickly.
yes, it does. On the other hand, it's probably actually cheaper than a subscription model, depending on how long you play and how long you subscribe for, especially at the pace they release books, which is not actually very fast.
No, they don't do that quickly for fifth ed. Fourth ed, they were still pretty quick about it. They weren't nearly 3035 levels, but they were still releasing a lot of content. So all told, if they had done something, if they had charged a buy book for the digital version for D&D Insider, it would have been insane. The actual subscription fee was still pretty high because at the time, even subscription services like that were a kind of new thing.
Yeah.
So they were still sorting it out, but it didn't work out too badly. But also, it's one of those things where it's like sometimes you don't play D&D for 6 months. Are you really going to keep up your subscription during that time?
Yes, because you forget your habit. That being the issue of subscription services in general for people, but that's a completely different issue.
That was the reason why they're listed on my monthly budget now, so I don't do that again.
Yep.
Yes, and finally, and I put it here partially because I don't think I found it in other DMGs. There's an actual section about fun. Remember, you're trying to have fun, and yes, this includes the DM. This is something you're doing to have fun with your friends. Jesus Christ, try and remember this.
Yeah, it's definitely something more common in more modern RPGs to kind of point that out.
Yeah.
The unfortunate thing, and again, we'll talk about this in some other episode where we're more talking about just general RPG philosophy and game approach and all that. The unfortunate thing is that there are a lot of people that come to the idea of game mastering or dungeon mastering as an adversarial relationship. It is me versus the players. They are trying to beat me. I am trying to beat them. And in the end, like, yes, some people do have fun with that kind of system, but it's inherently going to lead to tension and it's not going to form any sort of long lasting group or campaign. It is important to remember that we're all here to play a game.
Yeah, you kind of get that feeling partially because of, this is a combat system. Inherently, the DM is on one side of the combat and the players are on the other side of the combat. So, especially for newer groups, it can kind of feel like that because, the DM is throwing monsters at you and you try to defeat the monsters. And sometimes the DM gets a little bit too into trying to defeat the players, which is, by the way, trivial. Just throw something that's like way over for their power level in front of them. And it's the literal rock's fault. You're the DM. You can just kill them if you want to. But there's no fun in that. Trying to actually create a fun and proper combat encounter is actually kind of the art form of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
We'll get into a bit later in this book.
Yes, we will. All right. taxonomy, which they call player motivations, but this is straight up a taxonomy. I found it even more ironic that they call it player motivations because, okay, Timmy, Johnny, and Spike are probably the most known taxonomy in gaming, which is from Mark Rosewater of Wizards of the Coast.
Yes.
So
these are literally terms that were developed specifically when they were figuring out how people play Magic the Gathering.
Yeah.
And now have been grown into just general terms used for player motivation, just styles essentially.
Yeah.
These obviously have a few more than that because there's more breadth of possible motivations for a full role-playing game as opposed to a card game. But there is an awful lot of overlap.
There is an awful lot of overlap, and you almost boil it down to Timmy, Johnny, and Spike anyways if you want to.
Some of them are definitely subsets of a Timmy, a Johnny, and a Spike.
Granted, you can also just throw in Vorthos and Melvin and actually work out just as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, the ones they have in here, actor, who sometimes gets too into their character. But yeah, generally is the person who likes role-playing a bunch. Explorer, I have never met one of these in a tabletop game, but they're the ones who are actually exploring the world and the fluff and the lore that you have made up. And I refuse to believe these people exist.
They do. They're usually called dungeon masters.
Yes, that's the problem. Yeah, they're usually not on the other side of the table, unfortunately.
The only time you run into that is when you're in the situation where you are DMing a game and one of your players is also the permanent DM and is just so happy to be able to be there now.
And understands all that stuff that generally goes to waste that the DM does in order to actually build a campaign. The Instigator, which is a spectrum between fun and annoying. The people who okay. So originally when I was writing this list, I actually only had one word for Instigator. It was Bograt. That's besides the point.
I'm somewhere between an instigator and a thinker.
You are. That's not always the character you run. It's just that you do tend to run Instigator characters.
You're sometimes between the Instigator and the Instigator with extra steps.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I will say, I never do anything without thinking about it.
Even if the thinking about it is, what would my character actually do in this situation?
Yes.
That's important.
Yeah.
Role playing.
I mean, I play my character accurately to the character I built. It's just sometimes I built a character whose entire personality is, I'm over this shit.
Yeah.
Fair.
But yeah, the Instigator is very much is very much the person who likes to do things in the scene, like whatever their character likes to do. Either playing to character or just, okay, I just want to move things along type of thing. It throw a wrench in the works.
It's not necessarily a bad thing. Every one of these player motivations has its place, absolutely, is the thing. And you do need a balance of them to really make a successful party. Now, mind you, having too much leaning one way or another can cause, friction among the group. Just because if you have, for instance, somebody, a handful of people that want to be like the explorer or the actor types, and then you have somebody who's more like, the slayer or watcher types, there's going to be an issue there. One side or the other is not going to be having as much fun as they could be. But
yeah. Let's see. Then we get to the power gamer, who is too into the mechanics sometimes. This is almost a binary, and you can pretty much apply them to every single other taxonomy at the same time. They're rarely just the power gamer.
I think in our entire group, for the most part, are power gamers. At the very least, Yumi and Shiv are. But we also fill in other roles as well. Like we are power gamers because we understand the mechanics of the game and like to make really effective characters that we also then use to fulfill our other desires.
And in modern parlance, it's optimizer, not power gamer.
Yes,
which is much more accurate, anyways.
Much more accurate, has less negative connotations to it.
Yeah, because effectively, it's not that the power gamer / optimizer is trying to like win the game, because that's fucking dumb. It's just they're trying to make things they're trying to make their character effective, and work within the system that's given. Because yeah, you can have a concept for a great thief, and you have like a dexterity of 14, and suddenly you're not actually as good at thieving because you have a dexterity of 14, which is well above average, by the way.
Yep.
But functionally, your chance of failure is actually rather high because of how mechanics actually work in these games. So yeah, it's more about actually making your character behave how they're actually supposed to behave mechanically, and also not being bored in combat. A lot of it is about not being bored in combat or feeling useless. Because as I've said several times, because it's one of the grades in the Great Prestige class game, D&D is a game that happens to have non-combat elements. Instead, if you don't actually have something to do in combat, you're going to feel useless for like 2 or 3 hours at the fucking table a lot of the time.
Just to make sure my memory's not going, doesn't your current rogue have a dexterity of 14?
Yes, but that's because I'm in base.
Yes, I know. It's just funny that you bring that up as the example. It's like, I distinctly remember last night you rolled a 1 for initiative and had a 3. So.
Yes.
I've been trying to figure out which of these I am.
I'm not a stereotypical rogue, but yeah. Okay.
I think I'm a fair mix of actor, explorer, and watcher.
We haven't gotten to the end yet, so I didn't really, or at the beginning, really explain taxonomy. Taxonomy isn't per se.
You don't fit. Nobody fits into one.
No one fits into one. It is broad categories of motivations, and generally goes over. It's not meant to be like pure stereotypes or anything like that. They are just like it's very generalized. And yes, Slayer, 2 into murder sometimes is not always the power gamer. Sometimes it's not even the power gamer. But it's just the people who absolutely just want to kill everything they run across.
Oftentimes otherwise known as the war gamer.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say.
They're not here for the role playing. They're here to move the pieces and kill the things.
Yeah. This is not necessarily bad.
Again, none of these are necessarily negative.
Yeah. Honestly, I'd fall into the Slayer category a little bit. I do enjoy combat. That doesn't necessarily mean I want to get into combat at every opportunity per se, but when there's a grid, it's okay. It's go time for me. It's just because I enjoy the mechanical pieces, and strategy RPGs are very much my jam. The storyteller. This really is the DM. Also, no one remembers what you said 10 minutes ago.
There's also a lot of overlap between the storyteller, the actor, and the explorer.
Yeah, kind of. Hypothetically, the explorer is on the other side of the table, and storyteller. Okay, all of these are supposed to be like on the other side of the table, I think, by how they wrote them. But it's like I have never. Storyteller really is just the DM's job, give or take. Occasionally, some player is trying to create a narrative, but that's more on the instigator that's more an instigator than anything else. And it's just I'm not sure. Like prefers the narrative of the game and character motivation and personality. Yeah, it's like again, this list is probably bigger than it actually needs to be per se, but this is a distinction, but it's probably too much of a distinction.
Yeah.
And again, the thinker, which is the instigator of extra steps, as I call it, is the one who's carefully planning out this still basically comes down to instigator. It's like they're trying to figure out the action, but they're more doing it after thought, which is sometimes the instigator anyways. Occasionally they're very impulsive, but
The primary difference between an instigator and a thinker is the instigator is, ooh, what does this button do? The thinker is, well, if I press this button, this is going to happen, which will cause this to happen. The instigator is taking a sledgehammer to a Jenga game. The thinker is building a Rube Goldberg machine.
Yeah. And finally, the watcher, also known as either the newbie or person who's here just socialize with his friends, which is fine. If that's the only motivation you have for being here, however, that it's not some. It doesn't lead to issues with everyone else, but you're going to get bored very fast, honestly.
The balance of the watcher is if you are part of a group of friends and one of the things your group of friends does is play, D&D or play tabletop role-playing games, it's totally fine to take part in the game for that purpose. It is not necessarily great to be a watcher if you're looking for like a pickup game at your friendly local game store.
Yeah.
That's not going to lend itself well. You're going to end up bored. You're going to end up, out of it. But it's like, yeah, I mean, we have had absolutely people within our group even that were watchers that were within our group because they were just people we knew, we hung out with, whatever. And we were like, hey, we're playing D&D on this day. Do you want to join? And like, sure, and then we would help them build a character, help them get into it, help them learn to play. But they're just there to hang out with us. They're not really there because they're engaging in the game, and that's fine because they were part of our friend group before they were part of our D&D group.
And either they find other motivations, stuff they actually like about D&D, or they drop out. It tends to be one of the two, and it's fine to drop out if you're not having fun.
Yeah,
we can socialize at other times. You don't have to be.
I mean, it's even an instance of comparatively, to a semi-related hobby of board gaming. Hunter hangs out with us while we play Frosthaven. He's not interested in playing the game.
Yeah,
but he just hangs out there to hang out, like
which
whatever.
Is really fine. And extra bits in this chapter that we're talking about. How to go without roles at the table. That's soon. Because player characters don't actually. You don't have to enforce roles on the group. You just have to kind of account for the fact that certain roles didn't show up, and it's something for both sides of the table to consider. Although controller is probably the easiest to go without, especially from what I've read on optimization in 4th edition. Like, controller is the least necessary role, but it kind of still has to be covered, or it's kind of still good for it to be covered by other characters, because even though all the classes do have defined roles, they can step outside of them somewhat. You'll find AoE attacks within other characters. There's buffs and debuffs.
Just not as prominent, and usually not quite as effective at it.
They're not as good. They're not as prominent, but you can make up the slack. Leader is probably the hardest one to make up the slack on, because
it's your primary healer, basically.
Yeah, because you just don't find the ability to do healing surges or throw healing surges on other people as minor actions several times in combat is not a thing that other classes have, and is literally a power built into every single leader.
That being said, it's kind of interesting that this is reflected in the fact that there is a singular controller in the base book.
Yes.
Sometimes no one at the table wants to play wizard.
Yeah, thankfully they do make more.
Yeah, as later books come in, we get more controllers, and honestly, I think every single one of them is more interesting than wizard, as interesting as 4th ed classes actually get.
Yes, basically. But yeah, we'll go over those in another week. And DM style words to consider, and not bad initial advice. Actually, it's like, where do you lean between these two words, like bold and cautious, gritty and cinematic, etc. And sometimes the answer is both. Honestly,
the one that I think is the most requires flexibility is pre-planned versus improvised.
Yeah,
it is 100% impossible to actually run a tabletop role-playing game entirely pre-planned, because you cannot ever know what your players are going to do.
Yeah,
you can have a fully pre-planned story, and you go write it down and publish it on archive of our own. Like, you're not doing a tabletop RPG at that point.
No,
Matt Mercer.
Yeah, player input will absolutely derail pre-planned things. Depending on your group, it can be a little bit of derailing, or let me throw out the entire back half of my story.
Yep. It's actually a really interesting instance. The most recent campaign for Dimension 20, there was a combat that the players were not actually supposed to win. They were not supposed to succeed in stopping a thing from happening that was supposed to happen during this combat, but they managed to do it. And because they always do the little sort of after talk episode after the episode, it's like usually 15-20 minutes of them kind of chatting about it. And Brennan, the DM for Dimension 20, was like, okay, well, you guys go, have a good night. I'm going to be up until 2:00 in the morning redesigning the entire back half of the campaign.
Yep.
Yep. That can absolutely happen. But yeah, it's why I kind of also recommend just don't work too deeply on details and
basic outlines.
Basic outlines. Or if you do have details, make sure they're flexible enough that you can plug them in. And
yeah, it is fine to have very specific scenes or very specific events that need to happen, and you can kind of force and railroad those, but do not do it for the entire story. That is again, we come back to that whole, we're all here to have fun. If you are just saying, hey, you guys get to play in my story, write a book.
Yeah, and finally, table rules. This was a much, much, much bigger section, but I didn't want to actually. It was a couple pages, but it was just a decent things to keep in mind. And this list actually treats the group as equals, DM and players alike, which
Yeah.
is also positive.
Which is very important.
Yeah,
The big thing is, so it's anyone who's sort of newer to the hobby of tabletop role playing games has joined in the past, 5-10 years since the prevalence of things like Critical Role and whatnot have very much increased the popularity of the hobby and brought in a lot of new audiences. May be shocked to find out that this is not a thing that was really present in most sort of Dungeon Master Guide style books for systems really prior to this point. This is one of the first times I've ever seen this really codified in an actual book saying, hey, have some rules set and all that. Things like session zeros to actually discuss things like what tone we're looking for, what we're looking to get out of the game, things like that were not really all that prevalent for a very, very long time in this hobby. And also establishing things like there are all kinds of tools out there now for GMs and tables to use of like, hey, we can have they have almost like soccer style penalty cards, yellow cards, red cards kind of stuff, where players, if the situation is happening and they're not necessarily comfortable with what's going on, they can flag it, things like that. Tools like that just weren't a thing for a very, very long time, which is also why the hobby honestly got a pretty bad reputation for not being very welcoming and accepting of other people, is because you either put up with the way things were or you got the fuck out.
Also, session zero was not a part of the vocabulary back in initial D&D.
No.
At all. There might be the character creation session, but there wasn't much else being gone over during that or anything like that. You make it like a campaign outline and various things like that. But yeah, even the term session zero is a much more recent thing, and RPG philosophy was still very primitive and kind of still is very primitive to some extent. I don't think RPG philosophy is as explored as it could be, per se.
No, but we've definitely had leaps and bounds of evolution away from it. But I mean, it used to just be the GM/DM was in charge.
Yeah.
So even you pointing out that here that treating them as equals, again, pretty revolutionary for the time, even being late 2000s.
Oh yeah, the 3M the 3M, the 3.5 Dungeon Master's Guide was a lot more paternal in its advice. Dungeon Master's Guide 2 was a lot better.
Yeah, they had started moving toward it.
Yeah, and this one is even more advanced from there. But yeah. All right, moving on to Chapter 2, Running the Game. So, again, starts with prep advice here, and honestly, this is similar to the 3.5's Dungeon Master Guide 2, which was kind of a bit on the okay, this varies a lot from style to style how much time you actually need to prep a game, and also honestly what system to some extent. But yeah, the 1 hour rule of thumb here assumes a faster combat than 4th edition is actually prone to having. It assumes that every combat in 4th edition is going to take you 1 hour to resolve.
I don't think we've ever had a combat in 4th edition take 1 hour.
No. I have played nowhere near as much 4th edition as you have. I know that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Just by that.
Even with a system that was basically simplified down to you have a hand of cards, choose one to play on your turn, combat still takes forever.
Yeah. Especially at higher level play with more.
I have 15 cards to choose from. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the amount of potential actions is analysis paralysis incarnate.
Yeah, I know we get into it later about the cognitive load.
Yes. But yeah. And again, the amount of time you're going to spend on prep is going to vary a lot in style, also in how much system mastery you have. Combats are a lot easier to throw together when you have a giant list of monsters that are already prepared for the system versus I'm new to this and I have no fucking idea what's going on.
Well, the other big thing I wanted to say is it's not only just system knowledge, but it's also advanced prep, because this is talking mostly about preparing for an individual session. It's not necessarily talking about preparing for a campaign. Now, obviously, it does talk about using the pre-made modules that have been published, which is certainly a style you can go with, and it's a way you can go. But the big thing is I think a lot of how much time it takes to prep a given session also depends very heavily on how much time you took before the campaign even started planning things out. We just talked about the pre-planning versus improvisation. And within the context of a session, it is totally fine to be very flexible. But I think that if you spend a lot of time preparing a background for the campaign, you have those tools in your pocket already, which makes planning a session much faster.
Yeah. And also, yeah, it does also assume that modules themselves are faster for you to run than doing things yourself. For me, it is literally the fucking opposite.
Yeah, no, if I'm running a module, I have to study the entire fucking
Yeah.
module to know what the fuck is going on so I don't inadvertently derail my own fucking module.
Yeah. And for other people, that is actually the opposite. Again, that varies from person to person. Some people run modules a lot better than they do making their own campaign. I'm basically the opposite. I would need to figure out what the hell the module is trying to do and what's
Sometimes
going to happen in advance.
deeply fix the stuff built into the module because they're
Yeah.
very bad at making things for their own game.
Yeah, there's that. And or sometimes the module is just not good. But that's a different matter entirely.
What, you mean like having the back two modules of a 6-part campaign both be entire module long dungeon crawls back to back?
I really wish if they were going to do entire module long dungeon crawls, they do it at the fucking front.
Well, especially after you spent the other 4 modules leading up to this with a lot of like exploration and lore building and like
Yeah.
a deep dive into like a very specific nation that has a really interesting like history to it, and then it's just you're in a pyramid, you're in a sphinx, now you're in a pyramid.
Yeah. Oh, it was even super. It was like you're in a sphinx, which was the back half of the 4th module. This is
Pathfinder's Mummy's Mask is the module we're talking about.
Yeah. So the back half of the 4th module was you're in a sphinx, which was a mid-ish sized dungeon. Then the next module was entirely like a trenches excavation site thing that was very large, and then the final dungeon was just the final pyramid of the titular mummy.
Yeah.
Which was fucking massive and really stupid. This is like room by room dungeon crawl of massive scale of, oh dear God, what's wrong with you? All right. Now the advice proper in this chapter, which we're going to speed run through effectively, and having now read through several pieces of DM advice, including the 3.5 Dungeon Master's Guide recently, I can say this book is probably the best collection of starting DM advice I've ever read. All the listed sections on the side are good to read through if you are a starting DM, even if you are planning to play a completely different system, with the exception of dispensing information where knowledge of 4th Ed is required to translate it, but it's still actually good information. It's still actually good advice. I've gone over in a bit more detailed Dungeon Master advice in the 3.5 Dungeon Master's Guide video and Dungeon Master's Guide 2 video, especially Dungeon Master's Guide 2 because it has not much else. And I might make a future video a future RPG philosophy video on Dungeon Master advice if I get enough stuff together and or I don't feel like it or something. But yeah, in general, if you're starting DM in this book, you can actually find this book. This book is actually pretty good for just giving you beginner advice. And at the back of this chapter was troubleshooting, which no longer recommends punishing players for having the audacity of dying in combat, like in 3.5. There's no longer level loss. It's like, hey, if their character dies, let them come back at the same level. We're crying out loud.
Yeah. What, are you saying you shouldn't keep your party levels balanced?
So much of this stuff is just carry forward. We talked about it before, how there's so much stuff. Because, I mean, this is one of the most dreadful carry forwards of the very original origins of D&D, basically being, for all intents and purposes, a tabletop war game, where it was not real, like, there was an adversarial relationship not only between the DM and the players, but also kind of between the players and the other players.
Yeah.
Sort of. It's a little bit different from that. It's effectively, it wasn't quite, it evolved a little bit from Wargame to, okay, the DM was originally called the referee for good reason. It was almost especially when it comes to the Midwestern, because there's kind of two philosophies that also originated there, because there was basically the West Coast philosophies and the Midwest philosophies. And the Midwest philosophies were more like, this is a board game and the referee is here to just
make sure the rules are it's running by the rules.
Yeah, is effectively here to be a living rule book / like the board itself. Whereas the Western philosophy games we'll probably get into a lot of later, and including how they just played D&D was much more into the role play and character and whatnot.
Yeah, but the biggest carryover and the carry through, and that even to this day, there's still some amount of it, but it's definitely significantly lessened. But it's just like there have to be penalties, and it's like,
well, yeah,
okay, but why?
The original again, back to the whole board game design. It's like, okay, the character died, so you get a new character starting at level 1. And you keep going from there. And there was like, I don't know, 12 guys following you around because you have a bunch of hirelings, so you just pull one of them in, and it's like, okay, he's at this level. It's also why the stats were rolled up at random, because again, it has much more of a board game philosophy. Also, the stats weren't anywhere near as influential on how characters actually perform, so there was a bit of that. That does help things. Like, rolling flat random stats in like 3-5 is going to feel fucking awful, quite frankly. There's a reason why, even in the base book, even with how they recommended rolling stats, it was like, okay, take 4 dice, drop the lowest, put the stats where you want.
Yeah, you don't roll 3d6 in order, and those are your stats.
Yeah, and if it comes out too low, fuck it, reroll. Yeah.
There is something to be said for randomly rolled stats, but it has to be done as like part of the intention of the game you're putting together, basically. Everybody has to sort of buy into the fact that, like, you may get a 6, man. You just might.
Also in this edition, Resurrection is cheaper than anywhere else. It is a level 8 ritual with a 500 gold point cost, or gold piece cost. Basically costs 500 gold to revive a character, period. You have to buy the scroll technically too, but because that's how rituals work, you basically need someone who can perform a ritual, which is either at the time the game came out, a clerk or a wizard. As the game goes on, way fucking more classes, and anyone who takes the feat. Yeah. Being able to res characters is easier in this edition than any other edition. I'm 50-50 on that, honestly. If there's no penalty for death anymore, sometimes when my character dies, I actually do just rotate to another character. I guess it does leave open basically the option of, no, I want to keep playing this character.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, is that it's allowing the option. Because I also, we've talked, I always have backup characters ready because I like making characters. It's a thing I do just out of hobby.
Yeah.
So I always have backup characters ready, but sometimes if I've got a character that, like, I've been building a story around, I've gotten really involved in thing X, Y, or Z, I don't necessarily want to switch it to a character at that point, but I also don't want to put the burden on the party of like, hey, you guys got to drag my body back to a temple so we can get me resurrected.
Yeah.
Like, it's unfortunate, but it is there. At the same time, like, I can see the argument for, like, there needs to be some penalty for death. Otherwise, you'll just do stupid things all the time and not care that your character dies. But I think that comes back to a lot of the expectations of players. It's like, I as a character, even knowing, like, oh, we can just get resurrected, like, whatever. I'm still not going to have my character do intentionally stupid shit.
Yeah.
Because I might know that they can come back pretty easily, but, like, again, it comes back to the player motivations and those player mindsets as well. It's like, I'm still putting myself somewhat in the mind of my character of, like, they don't want to fucking die.
No.
Getting killed hurts.
Yeah, like to me, it's a bunch of numbers on a sheet, sure, but they're still a person in the world that they're in. They're not going to just be like, oh, well, they can just bring me back. It's like, no, you're still going to fucking die, dude. Like, that's not a good experience.
And also, they have decent. Also, in this area was decent advice on fixing your mistakes. Like, if you make an encounter too hard, this is the most common mistake that a DM can actually have. To be completely honest, how to massage this in order to in order to not have a TPK, because you don't want a TPK at that point.
And yeah, for the most part, this is good. The only one that I disagree with on there, of the specific ones they call out of, like, hey, here's some ways to adjust it, I do disagree with the quote-unquote forget to check to see if an ability refreshes. The other ones are fine. They're adaptations, they're massages you can make. That one is just outright essentially not following the rules of the game to make it easier on them, which I feel like is, even if it is doing it to try and help them get through an encounter, it is still, by definition, sort of cheating. You are ignoring the rules of the system.
Kind of are, but
I don't like that. The other ones I think are
It's-
totally fine. You as the DM can choose to make the monsters make a stupid decision,
Yeah.
but don't like be like, oh, they suddenly don't have this fucking ability.
I honestly think it's more covered by the one above it, anyways.
Yeah.
Because
exactly.
Just
their
because it
powers-
refreshes doesn't mean they have to use it.
Yeah, the
Exactly.
powers are active abilities, and you can have it just saved for later when it's actually more appropriate to use the ability and isn't going to cause
Yeah.
like a TPK or something.
Yeah, exactly. It's like just because an ability refreshes doesn't mean it immediately has to use that ability. Like just you still make the check to refresh, and you go, oh, but it's really pissed at you right now, Steve. So it's not going to use the fireball. It's instead just going to fucking attack you.
Or you can inject some character in the monster of, it feels like it's got this so in hand, it doesn't need to use that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't know what's going to come the rest of the day. It doesn't know that it's that it's in an encounter and its abilities refresh every encounter. Like that's not a, you know.
Yeah, it's back to okay. Monster resources are even stupider when it comes to that because like monster doesn't care whether it's a daily or encounter power.
No, they
It's just-
refresh on die rolls.
Yeah, but I mean, even if for some reason, yeah, because their monsters are built completely differently in the system. They're characters
Yeah.
for once, but like even if they weren't, that was actually the problem with 3.5 is like a spellcaster, a monster spellcaster doesn't have to give a fuck about his highest level spell slots. He can basically just go full alpha strike and nuke and blow every single spell.
Yeah.
because he's just going to be dead.
Dead. Yeah. But yeah, again, it's like that's why just that one specific one I disagree with as a suggestion. I feel like it
Okay.
in an individual instance it may not be bad, but I feel like it encourages bad habits.
It's also something that might happen anyways, even if you're not.
Yeah.
trying
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
encounter.
But the fact that it puts forgetting quotes as if like, oh, you can just intentionally, oh shit, I forgot. Like, no, like if you forget, you forget. But if you're intentionally just like, oh, I'm just gonna choose not to make that refresh roll, it's like make the refresh roll and then choose not to use the fucking ability.
Yeah.
Yeah. The refresh rolls are basically just trying to. They're a weird thing, and we'll probably get into it later. But it is basically trying to get away from the burden of trying to remember whether or not the monster has this thing available now, like with Dragon's Breath, how they had a cooldown.
Yeah, but because like here's the
But
thing,
yeah.
right? Like so all of these, you know, if you realize that an encounter is too hard and you start essentially adjusting it to try, you know, oh, I gotta shift this, whatever. It is entirely possible it could start swinging back the other way because you corrected too hard.
Yeah.
And at that point, you're like, oh shit, well now I gotta check and see if that refreshed. It's like just still make the fucking refresh check so you have it in pocket later on. If all of a sudden the encounter starts swinging back the other way, and you're like, okay, I do need to make this a little bit more challenging now. Oh, look, an AOE attack.
Yeah.
Also, if you get in the habit of neglecting to make that roll in favor of them, you're more likely to
Actually forget to do it. Yeah.
Yes. Also,
Like I said, forms bad habits.
Yep.
also just make the refresh roll behind the DM screen.
Yeah, they don't need to
give a
know.
fuck- Yeah, they don't need to know that part.
It does talk in, I think, in the character death section specifically about rolling in front of the screen. You know, to
Sometimes yes, sometimes
yeah,
no.
it is absolutely a case by case basis. They don't need to see every roll you as the DM make. In fact, one of the things I do when I'm actually running with physical dice and a physical screen, I like to roll a lot of times that I'm just rolling dice to roll dice.
Yeah.
There's not actually anything going on. There's not, especially once we got into systems like Fourth Ed where they started having actual passive stats, you know, passive perception, passive insight, things like that. I'll roll dice because you know if the players if you're you know the characters are walking along somewhere and they hear dice rolling behind the table, all of a sudden they're like, oh shit, something's going on. I start looking around. You know, it's to help. Not necessarily that you expect every player to metagame or whatever, but there's an inherent instinct to do that of like, oh shit, something's going on. So I roll dice to roll dice sometimes just to break that expectation from players.
Strangely enough, Gary Gygax used to do that too.
Yep.
Just as a way of, because he knew exactly where the plot was going, but he wants players to know that whatever you do, it has a chance. And I'm just making, and I've made up a system on the spot. But
Right.
in reality, he knows exactly where the narrative was going to go, so he doesn't actually care what the result was. He knew exactly what was going to happen. But all right, moving on. Problem players, you know who you are. So the short answer to all of these is tell them to tone it back a bit, honestly, when it came to all these things. Like out of control players, prima donna players, rules lawyers, balancing tastes. Yeah, well, balancing tastes is its own thing. But the other three is basically like if the player is taking up too much time at the table, it's like, okay, let other people do things. And the rules lawyer is also more of a matter of like, okay, YouTuber I quite like watching the videos of, named Seth Skorkowski, actually has a rules lawyer video where he kind of actually divides the rules lawyer into two different taxonomies. There's the rules sage. Those people are great because those people who just know the rules of the game and just whenever the DM is having trouble, actually just explain it. And there's the rules lawyer who is the total prickish dick ass, who is just trying to use the rules as a technicality in order to get around things and is just kind of like awful. Uh, one of these is very good and one of these is very bad behavior. Sometimes they blend together. It's it's the difference of this game has rules and sometimes they're a bit complicated and it's nice to have someone who's just kind of a living encyclopedia of them and can just pull up how they're going. It's basically their approach to how they use the rules.
Yeah.
Is are you trying to be a lawyer and manipulate the rules to your own advantage, or are you trying to be neutral and just explain the rules and then let the DM do whatever because he's the DM and this is his job kind of in the game.
Now, one thing I will point out is I think probably the most important part of this entire page is that very first block on setting expectations, because again, a lot of problem player stuff, and again, this is, design philosophy that is developed significantly in the past, 17 years since this book came out. That things like having a session 0 and setting those expectations and setting things like, hey, we're not going to stop the game to go look up a rule. We're going to run with it and do whatever, kind of thing. Those can help deal with problem players before they become a problem. Now, obviously, there are some people, if they are of that particular personality type, somebody who is truly and deeply a rules lawyer is going to be a rules lawyer no matter what you do in a session 0. But you have at least established the expectation of like, hey, if you fucking do this shit, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to win just because you quote, page 183 of the player's handbook says this. Well, guess what? We all agreed to do this. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing. And I think like, especially with rules lawyering stuff, I think obviously being within it, it's, somewhat biased, but I feel like the way that we tend to handle it generally kind of works fine. Is if a rules question comes up, if somebody happens to know the rule, we go with that. If we think, if not, we make a common sense decision, and then maybe in somebody's off time between their turns, they'll go look and say, "Hey, by the way, for the next time it comes up, here's what the rule actually says."
Yeah, maybe we correct something on the spot, maybe we don't. It's whatever makes the most sense to do. Yeah. Also, do note that the DM himself can have all of these traits.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, the DM can absolutely just take all the table time. The DM can. All right, now here's the combat, and the player characters are in the background dealing with the goblins while this main NPC is fighting this other main NPC, and I'm slamming my.
What the fuck is this? World of Warcraft?
Yeah.
No, see, that would be the players taking on the big bad, and once they've got them down on their knees,
then
the other
the
person
primary
shows up.
NPC showing up to finish them off. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I'm proud that they finally stopped doing that, but it's still like 80% of their story.
Yeah.
You have to get to the parts where they're not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah. And DM rules lawyer is more like, okay, the game does have rules. At least try to if you have a house rule, make sure they know it's a house rule ahead of time. If you want something to happen, just have something happen. Don't fudge the rules. You could just go straight back into cinematic and like narrative descriptions rather than actually like dice rolls and such. Like if you want an NPC to die, you can just say, and this guy cuts off his head and he's dead.
Yeah.
You don't have to like go, and he rolled a natural 17, which is totally a crit with a sword that I suddenly made up he has or something.
Yeah. You don't have to justify it.
Yeah.
You are telling a story.
His name is Harshafant. He dies. He did have a name.
Okay. I don't disagree that Harshafant should have died from being hit by that. I disagree that we, as the Warrior of Light, would have. Harshafant died pointlessly, but he absolutely would have died by being hit by that.
No, I agree.
Which is justified by us later fighting that same guy and getting hit by that attack, and it does like 10% if you're not a tank.
Yep, I know.
But yeah, other people at the table are going to have expectations that you're going to at least relatively stick to the rules of the game you're playing. Don't go too far outside of them.
Yeah.
One way or the other.
It should be said it took me about 15 seconds to remember his name.
Yeah, because who the fuck is Harshafant?
And finally, the section I said for last year, balancing player taste is probably the hardest of all these, depending on what your group enjoys doing.
And is again a very important part of a session zero. Again, finding out what everybody's looking to get out of this game.
Yes. We know each other well enough to actually kind of know what everyone likes. And balancing a table that has like a lot of people who like roleplay but aren't so into combat, and people who have combat and aren't so into roleplay is really kind of somewhat balancing time, but also balancing like how the encounters play out.
And even then, within our group, so again, we've been gaming together for almost 2 decades now. As terrifying a number as that is to think of.
Yeah.
And even then, sometimes we'll put together a character or things will go in an unexpected way, and it just doesn't quite work out. We literally had that happen in our current D&D campaign. What Shiv had pitched to us as the basis of the campaign sounded like it was going to be very focused around a single individual town that we were all, part of. And so I built a character with the idea of like, he's a very integral part of the town. He's very invested in the welfare of the town. And then it turned out that, like, as things progressed, we really spent much more time outside of the town than we did in it. And it was becoming harder and harder to justify reasons he would agree to leave.
Yeah.
Because he was pretty integral to keeping, he was essentially the town handyman for all intents and purposes. He had apprentices he had trained. There were other handymen around town, but he was the best, the most knowledgeable, the keystone that was keeping the buildings from, falling apart and kind of stuff. And so it was harder and harder to justify him going out somewhere. So literally we went through multiple sessions. I mean, almost, God, we've been playing that almost a full year now.
Yeah, I think it's almost fully. Yeah,
and I just recently, about a month ago, switched characters because I was like, it's very difficult to justify my character going out on these adventures or these expeditions with the other characters. And I don't want to, like, I didn't mind it. I wasn't offended by it. I wasn't upset that, like, my character was being left behind and they were going off to do these things. It's just like, I'm just playing to what the character is. I can't reasonably justify being like, oh yeah, let me just drop everything I'm doing, my business, my important work, and go off with you guys on a random journey to go investigate invisible sky islands that only one character can see.
Yeah.
Like, he just wouldn't do that. And so sometimes it's even groups that have been together for a long time still don't quite hit this. Like, it is a very difficult thing.
Yeah. And to some extent, I think it's also part of Shiv's style does make stuff. Or I know Shiv's style enough to know that he makes, or he builds stuff as he goes along. So he himself might not have quite had that in mind either.
Well, and also it's again it's trying to cater to the enjoyment to the most number of people possible. And when it comes down to it, my character was the only one that was particularly invested in doing things around town. Every other character, like one character, literally tries to be out of town as much as possible so they don't have to do paperwork.
I don't know what you're talking about.
And one character is very focused on investigating the mysteries of what's happening in the world, which is very difficult to do from just within the town.
Yeah, again, so my character is a scholar, which is why the high int and not the high int.
It's like every other character, it turned out, was way more willing to just pick up and leave, and my character was the only one that was like, no, I actually have a fucking job to do that's very important to me to do in town.
Yeah.
It is not the fault of anyone. It is just styles, and I didn't even necessarily build Smith to start that way. It's just kind of how he turned out to be.
But yeah, and also the more players you have, the table to hardness is going to be
absolutely.
But yeah, it's generally stuff to talk about with the players and actually try and figure out things that are more like compromises within compromises, so to speak. Like the non-combat parts can still be entertaining to the people more interested in combat encounters, as long as you're honestly just tone down their intrigue. That's really all you need to do.
Well, and this also comes back to a lot of this also on the part of the DM is the more time you have put into prep work before the campaign even starts, before you even have a session zero, the better you can build those expectations and have a stronger idea of what the campaign is going to look like, which can help the players then integrate themselves into that and understand what they're they already know obviously what they're looking to get out of it, but they can adjust what they're looking to get out of it based on the information they're given about the campaign to be like, hey, that sounds interesting. I'm going to build my character around kind of that aspect of it because it sounds like you've got a really good idea for it, and I think that's interesting. So there's a lot of back and forth. It's, again, something that's evolved even further since this book was written, is having that sort of equal and even discussion and making sure that everybody's on the same page and everybody has expressed what they're interested in doing and works to accommodate that, including the DM, because again, the DM is also there to have fun.
Yes. And also sometimes certain systems just don't work out for the group. It happens.
Absolutely.
There are a bunch of different role-playing systems. You might want to just try a different one.
Yep.
All right. On to combat encounters. Right. So how to run a combat. Again, more good starter DM advice. Also somewhat universal. This depends on the system. If you know how 4th edition roughly works, you'll get more out of this chapter. But this actually works for basically everyone.
I think my biggest how to run a combat advice tip is, for the love of God, have a shorthand ready for all your combatants. Yes. Please do not flip back and forth between books or a website or whatever to have to look up every monster's stats and abilities every time their turn comes up. Jesus Christ.
Yes. In the modern era, it is actually pretty easy to throw in like
a Google sheet, anything. Have fucking screenshots of the website you got them on. Anything.
Yes.
Anything for a quick reference, please.
Let's see. Also, passive checks. This technically came up earlier, but we'll talk about it now because it came up again in the book. So after an encounter, and also saying a note here, the after encounter for here was perception check plus 20. Or perception check is literally they're
taking, whoever has the highest perception is taking a 20.
Yeah. So
as long as there's not pressure, as long as there's not an imminent danger.
Yes. Which makes me ask the question: what's the point in this? For that matter, how do you use passive checks, perception, knowledge, etc.? That's more of an open question. It's kind of...
I think it comes back to something you were just touching on.
Yeah. I accidentally hit something.
I think you might have hit minus. Try hitting plus.
Wait a second. Yes, that was absolutely it. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, I think this comes back to something you were actually just touching on, which is the idea of leaning too much on the rules and, oh, this game has rules and the rules work this certain way, kind of thing. It is totally fine to have a check DC for finding things after an encounter if there is an imminent danger. If there is, we got to grab what we can see and get the hell out of here. Then you make a check DC and you make a perception check. If there's not an imminent danger, you don't have to couch it as being, oh, they just get a 20 plus whatever the highest perception is. You just say, no, they just find everything that's there. They can take as much time as they fucking want to search this room. They can take 100 on it for all it fucking matters, not just a 20.
Yeah, because if 20 plus their highest perception level isn't enough to find anything, then why did you...
Why the fuck did you hide it? Like, you literally made it impossible to find.
Basically, yeah. Why'd you even
Because they
waste your time
can't
doing
roll
that?
higher than that.
Yeah. It's like, this is literally something that has just got stuck in a module and they put a high DC on it for whatever reason that is within the realm of what a player character that power game perception might be able to do, but no one else. And okay, what's the point in that too? Is kind of my question. Either you want the player character to find it, or you didn't. It's just a binary in that respect. It's like, if they are searching an area thoroughly, they should either find everything or it was not findable.
Yeah, again, the only exception I would make to this is something like it does point out in the little like search the room DCs. Like, if there's like a secret door, sure, but at the same time, I would actually make them make the check for that, no matter how much time they have to look, because it is specifically something that is intentionally hidden.
Yeah,
that is in many ways an opposed check, right? It's not just, oh, they could spend 6 hours searching this room. It's like, they could, but they could spend 6 hours searching this room and still never pull these 3 books in this specific order,
Yeah. Yeah, something like that, which is more on the realm of puzzles and such. But yeah. And yeah, in general, how do you use passive checks is also a question for perception, knowledge, etc. Generally, I assume if they're trained in a knowledge, there's at least some baseline information they're going to have in that knowledge.
Yeah.
This varies greatly from system to system. But like, if it's like a percentage system, for example, and they have like a 50% in a knowledge skill of one sort or another, I don't make them roll for anything, because it is entirely possible within the realm of dice that your master scholar will know absolutely fucking nothing because he's rolling way too high on his percentile rolls, and it just comes out stupid. So like, baseline general knowledge, they should have more of than usual for people. Like those rolls I would reserve for like more obscure bullshit.
Yeah, and again, this all comes back to a philosophy thing, which we can go much deeper into in an episode wholly devoted to DMing philosophy. But yeah, there are a lot of games, especially in the modern era, where there's just a rule codified right into the book of like, don't make them make checks for basic shit, you fucking ass.
There is, but there's also a lot that just don't do that. And
Yeah, no, there are, absolutely.
Absolutely, like, really make it feel like you're supposed to make a roll for everything. And sometimes a 5% chance of failure is incredibly fucking high for something that is incredibly stupid and routine.
Yeah, it is quite literally. I think even like the modern World of Darkness stuff, for instance, is like, if they have 3 dots in drive, they don't need to make a check if they're going to the fucking grocery store.
They don't need to.
But sometimes it's raining. What if it's slightly windy?
Who knows? All right.
Oh God, this table.
Yeah, guidelines for improvising. Okay, this table is actually fairly useful, but it also shows the inherent rubber banding of the system, with skill and DCs naturally scaling at the same pace that they're going to increase with player characters. And what the fuck is the point in this? Damage is better on the scale than DC, that at least always feels like you're doing something. Like, okay, there's a large difference between I have a 55% chance of doing something in my turn and not, and as I get better at this, I still only have a 55% doing insane on my turn because everything else is going up in difficulty, and I hit that thing because I've gotten better at hitting that thing, but I don't quite hit it as hard, but I at least feel like I made actual fucking progress.
This table also is so indicative of why I love bounded accuracy and why D&D just went off the fucking deep end for a while from 3.0 late 3.5 into 4th ed.
Yeah.
Is that just the constant number go up becomes utterly ridiculous, because you look at the numbers in these tables, right, and it's like they just go up and up and up and up to the point where like what is considered a hard DC at 1st through 3rd levels is an easy DC by the time you're 16th level. But it's like, okay, I get that, but that's also not really progression. And then you see the footnote at the bottom for skill checks increase DCs by 5. Go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
Why? I mean, I know the answer why. It's because you add that for being fucking trained in a skill.
Yes.
What's the point of being fucking trained in a skill if you make skill checks harder by the exact amount training provides?
Yeah.
Well, if you're not trained, you're even more fucked now, aren't you? You're 25% more fucked, good sir. But yeah, you can also see the scaling on the damage is actually nowhere near as dramatic, it feels like. It's like, it's more than doubles over the course of 30 levels, but it's also over the course of 30 levels.
Yeah, it's
where
over
your
the
hit
course
points
of 30
go up
levels.
by way more than that even.
Yeah.
Which actually makes it kind of funny.
No, damage scaling is totally fine. It's just the DCs were a mistake.
Yeah. Because damage, again, you at least always do damage. It's not like the damage scaling makes you feel more effective, but even if you're a little bit behind on damage, that's nowhere near as bad as being a little bit behind on DCs, because it's a difference between I'm slightly less effective and my turn did nothing.
Yeah.
But yeah. Also, yeah, lower level enemies basically become completely fucking worthless to the DM, and you have to have progressively higher and higher level fodder being thrown at the players, which is its own pain in the ass on the DM that you just don't see in a bounded system, because in a bounded system, you don't have
everything's still effective no matter how late in the game you are.
Yeah, it just causes less damage. All right, poisons and diseases. They basically work kind of the same as in 3.5, but the attacks feel odd here, or even if it is no mechanically different than a save in 3.5. It's just weird that the poison is making an attack roll on you. What?
I understand it from the design perspective, because 4th ed essentially shifted to it's always the actor making rolls.
Yeah, it's just that the actor being the poison or disease is very
feels weird.
Unless it's the mighty germ. But also, the plus 4th ed defenses means that you need to have several levels of different of diseases and poisons, even the ones that don't do damage. This is just fucking stupid.
Yeah.
When the only thing it's doing is causing a status condition, and it's like, okay, we're adding level to things. Can we stop adding level to things?
The thing that I find that's interesting about that is that they do that, like, so within this, right, they have, like the example you're giving where it's like, oh, we have 2 different poisons that are the same effective thing, just one's like a higher level and therefore the numbers are higher than the others. Except as we saw in the previous book when we were going through the PHB, they do the same thing for magic items, except magic items are just a fucking table. It is the same magic item, just at different levels.
Yeah.
There is no reason they could have not have done that. I mean, like, oh, there's a level 10 drow poison, a level 15 drow poison, a level 20 drow poison.
And you could also do it in like one block and not take a bunch of fucking extra space.
Yeah, which we'll get into in, I think, the next slide or one slide after that. It's
something like that, yes. Because let's see, building encounters, chapter 4. So monster rolls, which is, I actually find this is an inherently better idea than player rolls.
Well, yeah, because you are one person as the DM building a group of monsters, as opposed it's literally the exact thing you pointed out about players. Rolls work great if you are building an entire group as an individual because you can balance them.
And furthermore, since the monsters are much more quick and dirty, I just gain a like single word selling point to what this monster does is fairly useful to me.
Yep.
If I want something to throw in the back, I'm looking for an artillery monster. If I want something to beat face, I'm looking for a brute. If I want something to annoy the fuck out of the players, I'm looking for a controller. It's yeah. Also, other things here lurk with a stinky get, also annoying to the players, but for different reasons because they actually have to find them and they have annoying.
They have to find them, then they have to hit them.
Yes. They also under their definition of lurk is somewhere between sneaky get and or just has fucking annoying defenses that make it hard to actually hurt them. Skirmisher is a monster that moves around a lot, and soldier is a tank. Also the sub or the sub things like minions, which are unique actually I think just to 4th edition, although I wish they showed up in other places.
I mean, it's absolutely a concept that you could transport forward. There's nothing stopping you from making minions in 5th ed.
Yeah, that is true too. But yeah, and also other systems. But yeah, minions have 1 hit point, but they take no damage if they're missed. So they have to be hit in order to be killed.
Well, they have to take damage in order to be killed.
Yeah, they have to take damage.
Because there are definitely, it even points out in here, there are things that deal damage that don't actually require it to hit roll. So like a paladin challenging a minion will just blow it up.
Yeah.
That does not actually require a to hit roll. It's just a thing they can do.
Yeah. Well, a paladin challenging a minion deciding to attack something other than the paladin will make it blow up. Damage and it'll just blow up. Yeah. Similarly, there's also like cleave, which will, if you hit this guy, you can also cause damage to that guy. That doesn't require that second part
not a 2-hit roll. Yeah.
So you can attack a non-minion, then cleave into the minion dies. And controllers just do AoE attacks.
Yeah.
So minions are very, very much disposable when it comes to fighting against controllers.
Yeah, as long as you have a controller, minions are nothing.
Yeah. Other classes, non-controllers have a much harder time doing AoE attacks. They do exist, but they're fewer and far between, and they're almost never their at-will powers. Whereas like controllers will have at-will powers that cover usually like a 3x3.
Yep.
And also there's the super type roles like elite, which is bigger, solo, which is bigger, and leader, which is a buffer for various monsters.
Yeah, so elites usually are included. There's sometimes one elite within a group that are just basically a bigger, tougher version of a monster. They have higher numbers, higher defenses, higher attacks, things like that. Solos, as may be implied by the name, generally are intended to be fought as a singular monster. They are not intended to be part of a group. You can include them as a group, but usually you'll have a sort of lower level solo included than you would if you were just running a solo as a solo. And leader is a interesting one in that it is not necessarily more powerful than a normal version. It just has additional abilities that provide benefit to the other monsters in the group.
Yeah, it's basically a keyword for the DM to say, hey, run this with other monsters.
Yeah, this one has an aura that adds 2 to the AC of all the other monsters around it or whatever.
Yeah, it's meant to be like literally it's meant to be a leader of a group. It's meant to be, it's meant to be.
It's the goblin shaman. It's the, the orc war leader kind of person.
Yeah, exactly. Also, solo encounters are almost their own kettle of fish when it comes to encounter design, because trying to design a good solo encounter is actually a very interesting concept, as usually action economics very much plays a heavy role when it comes to solo monsters.
5th ed handles this really well, actually, with the whole like legendary resistances, legendary actions kind of thing. 4th ed, again, had a almost prototype of that style of thing, but not quite fully there yet.
Yeah. Let's see. And encounter templates, so basically what the game expects you to fight, assuming a 5-person party, uh, like the most amount of monsters you come up with is about 7, uh, give or take. For yeah, it was about 7 on any of these tables, although it goes up and down. Like solo monsters, singular, is again like a singular thing in an encounter. Also, 1 normal monster equals 4 minions. 2 normal monsters equals 1 elite. 5 normal monsters equals 1 solo monster, and 1 normal monster equals 1 trapper hazard if you decide to throw a trapper hazard in. So you should always expect to fight either 28 minions or 7 traps. Depending on what you have in the party, those 28 minions are either going to be a fucking nightmare or really fucking easy, and no middle ground.
It's the one interesting thing where minions are possibly the one thing in the entirety of 4th Ed that doesn't actually scale, because even a level 30 minion still has 1 HP.
Well, the HP doesn't scale, but their
effects and stuff do, but it is still like they are still a single 1 HP monster.
Yeah.
Anything that actually gets through is just going to destroy them.
Yeah. And again, if you can figure out a way of causing damage without actually attacking them, they're probably no harder at a high level than they are at a low one.
And at higher levels, you have more options available typically to do that. So
yeah. Also, the monster fight that is 7 traps. It's like there are 7 pits in this room.
I mean, there's a place for it.
There is a place for it, and they're obviously not meant to replace literally every monster in the counter. But I've Dungeonscape in 3.5 actually had the best traps, which unfortunately I don't think carried over into this one, where they had like entire effectively trap room encounters that all you need to do was like sprinkle a couple monsters into, and also had like several different mechanics for overcoming them, so you didn't just have to have like a rogue to disarm them all ahead of time. It's like, no, this is meant for all the players are locked in a room and now they're in a situation, and there's actually dealing with it. It was almost proto skill challenges now that I think about it.
Yeah, to some extent.
Yeah, but it was like one of the most excellent. It was actually an excellent part of Dungeonscape. Yeah, the traps in here are more back to the traditional traps of like, yeah,
you trigger it, a dart shoots out of the wall,
which can be fine thrown into the middle of like an actual combat encounter. But if it's just on its own in the middle of the dungeon, it's what
as long as you design it interestingly and have it be part of an encounter and allow the players to use it just as much as the DM does.
Yeah.
Where like they discover it and it's like, cool, I'm going to throw the goblin onto the trigger.
Yeah, exactly. All right. And also how to terrain. So yes, you attack that grid with wet erase markers until combat looks passably interesting. Terrain adds color and character to combat, but it also takes prep time when it's done digitally. Also, terrain in this edition has rules, which is thankfully a lot more condensed than 3.5, which when you want to add, let's say, bamboo reeds, you go look up what bamboo reeds do, and they will be completely fucking different than other types of terrain for no fucking reason. And
yeah, every individual type of terrain has its own effects rather than many, like divided into basically 6 categories here. And even then, I'm using 6 generously because some of these are pretty much the same.
Yeah, and it doesn't have like nuances of how it affects every little skill and various things. There's the fantastic terrain, which does have their own rules under it, but it's a lot more modest, and it's fantastic terrain, not that fucking shrubbery over there.
Yeah.
Okay. And finally, non-combat encounters. And by finally, I mean by nowhere near finally. But next, non-combat encounters, some skill challenges. An idea a designer had. You need, as a group, X successes before Y failures. Generally need twice as many successes before as failures. Yeah, so if you need 4 successes to do the skill challenge, you fail the skill challenge when you get 2 failures. It's either good and bad, and it's entirely based on the situation, what the situation is, and how the DM runs that situation. So sometimes one person does a check, sometimes with aid of other players. Other times, just everyone does things and checks. And yeah, this is entirely on. I believe the next slide was on this. Yes, we'll continue to the next slide before we do much more discussion on this. Yeah. And the various types of challenges, non-combat encounters, like negotiations, murder investigations, chases, being lost, and combat encounters. in our non-combat encounter section.
Yeah, I mean,
I get what it is you're actually doing a skill challenge in the middle of actually fighting things.
Well, or it's a combat encounter designed to not be won by hitting the other dude till he stops moving.
Yeah. But yeah, this is best done intermingled with either a heavy role play or a combat, so as not to make it like a dumb dice off, especially in the system. Because this can very much boil down to just a dumb dice off, where it's like, I'm gonna roll a exploration and then a nature and then a whatever.
Yeah, so a lot of
go
this
around the table terribly doing this.
how
But-
effective skill challenges are within a game, I think, comes back to sort of discussing earlier. It's that knowing who your group is, what they're looking to get out of the game, how they play, and as a DM, designing skill challenges that are going to get the most number of players involved as possible. Because again, while it is possible to have one, like you said, where it's just like, oh, one player is really doing all the checks, maybe with the aid of a couple other players, you should always, if you as a DM are designing the skill challenge, you should always try and design it in a way that there's something for each character to be doing. Because every character is going to have their skills that they're good at. Like even fighters, have skills that they're going to be trained in, and you can make something within that skill challenge to be like, oh, they have to hold the door open while the thief triggers it, and that's an athletics check. There's something, designing it in such a way that there's always something there, and also it's a matter of having that back and forth. Skill challenges become more of a discussion than a combat encounter does, because it is working with the players to figure out what can your character do to contribute to this.
It's also the less of the mechanical clunk of the skill challenge that is up front and the more of the fluffy paint that's on top and the role playing proper, the better it's going to look.
Yeah.
If you are just like, Ed, we're just trying to find the lost puppy, and okay, I'm going to make X check, or
I'm going to do an investigation check. I got a 30. I found the puppy.
Yeah, stuff like that. It's like, that's not really a skill challenge. If it's like, or that's not really a good way of doing a skill challenge. If it's, okay, I'm going to go look in the barn, and this character is going to go this, and that character is going to go do that, and then upon doing those things, there's further stuff in that area.
Right, you find clues and then lead. It's not just here is the situation, now start rolling until it's done. It is progressing the skill challenge as they make their checks.
Yeah, have them actually work, have the players actually work through a puzzle and have stuff actually be interesting. Puzzle's probably the wrong word, but work through, like, have them figure out.
It is a narrative.
Yeah,
it is a skill challenge should be a narrative, not just a scene.
Yeah. Yeah, so they go entirely in both directions of, this was kind of a time filler where we rolled a bunch of dice, or okay, this was just an interesting mechanical background on what we should probably be doing anyways in the role play, in parts of the role play. It is entirely based on that, and sometimes a skill challenge isn't really appropriate for that. Just make a single fucking skill check.
Yeah,
honestly. Yeah, and puzzles. No, just no. Okay, more seriously, how good or bad puzzles are for your group depends on both tastes and how good the DM is at making puzzles to challenge the players with. It's.
So I think, again, it's very much a philosophy thing. I think the biggest thing is having larger meta puzzles within your campaign is fine. Having things where your players are gradually uncovering clues to a larger, grander puzzle that they're slowly sort of figuring out can work really well. Having it be, you enter this room and you need to solve this puzzle to proceed any further in the dungeon you're going through is a fucking nightmare, and probably the best way, even better than combat, to stall out a session indefinitely.
Alternatively, they answer the room. Then you put a Simon Says in the middle of the table. And it's like, okay, you have to
solve this room.
You have to reach level 12. Go. No, but like it is very much a case of I don't think puzzles are great for an encounter. Puzzles are better for a larger, long-term goal that the players are trying to solve to make a larger impact. Like puzzles can be the goal of a story arc, not a singular session.
Yeah. I didn't explicitly put it under here, but riddles they also consider puzzles, which is correct, but
again, they're a very different kind of thing.
They're a very different kind of thing, and again, your mileage varies greatly with how much your group enjoys or hates riddles.
There is a little sidebar on this page as well that I think is really interesting and is a genuinely always a sticking point for RPGs in general, because of the necessity of the abstraction of stats.
Yeah.
In that it is entirely possible to run a character that is far more intelligent than you are just based on the numbers, or far less intelligent than you are just based on the numbers. And so it's like, here's the thing. I'm a puzzle guy. I love puzzles. I spent the video game I have played the most in the past 2 weeks is Escape Simulator 2. I have completed all 3 base campaigns, and I'm going back through just hunting for the little tokens that they hide in the levels. And this took me probably maybe 12 hours to get through 12 rooms. I love puzzles. I have played characters with a 6 intelligence.
Yeah.
You're going to present a puzzle to me as a DM. I'm going to know the solution, but Throck can in no way, shape, or form solve this puzzle.
Yeah. You also run into similar things when it comes to like social encounters where your character may or may not be actually better at role playing.
Yes, highly charismatic, but you can't really string you can't string together the things that they would say to make the convincing argument because it's not a talent you possess. It's not something you're skilled at, but your character has, rolls a 26 diplomacy. It's like, okay.
Yeah, and the DM has to allow for it's
but
really bad.
Here's what it's suggesting is let them make checks to then give them clues to the puzzle, help them out with it. Be like, oh, you got a 26. You realize that like this piece actually goes here, and this is what you're looking for.
Yeah. And if the going back to the social thing the social skills thing for a second, if the person writing the character is nowhere near as good at social skills, give them some fucking slack.
Yeah,
I mean, like you don't expect everyone.
Don't make them give a grand speech. Just fucking don't. Nobody's gonna enjoy it.
Yeah, you don't expect your players to be able to get up and like beat a horde of orcs with fucking 2x4s. It's
right.
The player character does not need to be, or the person running the character does not need to be as skilled as everything the player can do as the character is themselves.
Yeah, like you can make the expectation that they at least have to give some general idea of what they're going for. You know, you're making a diplomacy check. Okay, what are you trying to convince them of? What are you like? What kind of thing are you bringing up to them? You don't have to give me the whole fucking speech, but at least tell me like what kind of thing you're saying to them, and then go ahead and make your roll. And like, oh, it really worked. Well, you convinced them of this, that, and the other, and here's their response. There's the level of expectation of like, okay, give me a general idea of what you're trying to convey so that I can then craft their response based on the role. But don't expect them to stand up and give a fucking motivational speech. Like, knock it the fuck off.
Yeah. Especially on the spot, improvised, because even someone who's actually good at that stuff, there's fucking limits, man.
Yeah.
All right. Traps. Just as boring, but now with levels to make sure everything comes to rubber band.
Yeah, this is where it comes up about them just making stacks and stacks of stat blocks for literally the same thing, except the numbers are 5 higher.
I don't know what you're talking about. It's not like they have rock slides and cave-ins and spheres of annihilation. Maybe the last one doesn't go with the 2, but it's like sometimes it is literally a different name for basically the same fucking thing.
But all the numbers are higher.
Yeah.
It's
like, why didn't you just make this scaling versions of this like you did with other things?
Yeah, you literally just put it in parentheses. It's level +5 or something.
Yeah. Like later on, when it comes to like powers, and I think you'll see powers that actually scale with the level of the players, much like at-will powers do, but they're like encounter or daily powers because they're meant to be had once at like early level, and then it goes up. You could have just done basically kind of the same thing with this, where just like any of the necessary numbers just go up with level.
What's annoying is even within here, you can take a look, like the false floor pit, down at the very bottom is upgrade to elite. Here's how you modify it to upgrade to elite. They could just very easily have had another little bar that says upgrade to level 15.
But yeah, much like powers, because they don't do scaling, at least initially, they just have to keep coming up with higher level equivalents of the same fucking thing with a different name, and it takes up an enormous amount of space in the book, which is basically 4th edition in a nutshell. Back to the whole, I think it goes from like page 25 to 176 for characters in the base player's handbook, because it's all just fucking powers.
Yep.
All right, adventures. This entire chapter, the more solid new DM advice on running and building adventures. This book has already earned my endorsement. We'll move on. Not really anything of much interest.
I think. Go ahead.
I'm not gonna lie, I saw the top thing where it said published adventures. Like, oh god, they're charging us for this book again.
No, but I think again the biggest thing is, and I mean probably the most prominent thing is the understanding of what the difference between a campaign and adventure in a session is.
Yes.
Yes, I probably should have put that on the slide. So a campaign is the entirety of the lifespan of.
It is the full story,
story.
start to finish. You can sometimes maybe come back to the same characters later, but for the most part, a campaign is the open and shut book on the entire lives of a given set of characters.
Yeah. Whereas an adventure is a particular story arc. It will usually take multiple sessions to get through, but is not necessarily, what's it called? It is only a piece of the whole campaign.
Yeah.
Basically.
There is a larger story that is running across the adventures. Some parts of that larger story, that campaign story, can be found in each adventure, but is not necessarily specific. Like, you don't get the whole story in a single adventure.
Yeah.
And then session is one part of an adventure. It is usually accomplishing one or two milestones toward the completion of an adventure.
It's usually a few encounters, whether they're non-combat or combat. They don't necessarily have to be skill challenges. It can be just
social encounters, puzzle solving, whatever.
Yeah.
A way to think about it is a campaign is an entire book series. An adventure is a book in that series. And
the session is a chapter.
The session is a chapter, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a very important thing to learn as a new DM, is the differences between those.
Okay.
And sort of how to plan out each one.
Yep. On to rewards. So Quest XP. This chapter is what it says on the tin entirely, but Quest XP is actually an idea I can kind of get behind a little. We don't even use XP.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're still running with an XP-based progression, then sure. I think it has become wholly irrelevant ever since basically we decided that it was a really dumb idea, because it was a really dumb idea to have different classes level up at different XP thresholds.
Yeah, they ditched that. They ditched that at 3rd edition.
XP at best is a useful tool for less experienced or newer DMs to understand about how long it should take for a party to level up. But really, milestone advancement is absolutely the way to go.
Yeah. Here's where I could actually see coming back to XP, because in a more like open world campaign where I actually have planned out, like, there's various little adventure vignettes of various length and within the area, I could actually see, okay, this one's only going to take this long, so it's worth this much XP, and this one's worth that much XP, especially in a more bounded system where it's not going to matter as much. I could actually see using XP as a way of figuring out, okay, how much have the players actually done, so how far are they to the next level, etc. Basically putting more of a number on it than the vague feel that milestones do, but that'd be more in like an open world campaign and not something as progressive as, or as semi-linear at the very least as we usually do, where we're actually going through a plot. It's you're better off just doing milestones.
Yeah,
but yeah, it also has the advantage of like if your XP is only coming from quests, the player characters don't have to act like absolute fucking murder hobos in order to gain a level, which is its own issue.
XP can also alleviate the point of if the party decides to go completely out of the way away from where the milestones are, they can technically still progress.
Yeah, the big thing is, and it's so again, as I mentioned last time around, for various and sundry reasons, I was actually looking at much older edition books.
Yeah.
And a thing that's interesting to note is because people have this misconception that earlier editions of D&D were very much like, oh, you only get XP from combat. That was actually never a thing. Even the rules as far back as
treasure.
Well, not even that. There was a thing as far back as 2nd edition in the DMG that actually talked about granting XP for basically like succeeding at like social encounters, convincing people. Basically, anything you did that progressed your goals got you XP. The problem was that it wasn't in a codified table. And so, because especially at that time, it was still really way more focused on people that had a lot of like wargaming background from that like Midwestern philosophy. They still were like, oh, well, I don't see hard numbers here. That means they don't exist.
Oh yeah, but I mean, all the white box, I think like basic D&D stuff. Monster XP wasn't a thing.
No, it was treasure.
It was all the treasure you found.
It was, but even then, even as far back as like 2nd ed, the 2nd ed DMG does actually say you should give them XP for achieving goals, regardless of how those goals are achieved. If those goals are achieved by slaying a dragon, yes, they get whatever XP the dragon is worth. If those goals are achieved by convincing a king to not send his army to war, they still get XP. We're not going to give you a hard number for this because that's for you as a DM to actually do your fucking job and figure shit out.
Yeah. And inherently, That's a good idea. I wouldn't mind the numbers. Just throw me a fucking table. I don't know, but
It is,
like,
but it's
yeah.
also the matter of like, yes, but like at the time, a table
yeah.
like this wouldn't make as much sense because again, back in second ed, different amounts of XP meant very different, wildly different things, depending on what class they were playing and what level they were. Because here's the thing: let's say you have a player that's a 7th level druid, XP stops mattering because they can't advance further without druids of a higher rank than them dying.
Listen, there's a rash wave of heart attacks happening just as you get up to level.
But you know what I mean, like.
But yeah.
And yes, hi Hunter. Yeah,
Yeah.
you were capped at 7th level as a druid because there were only allowed to be X number of like hierophants, grand druids, etc. in the world at any given time.
Yeah.
You were never able to be more than I think 14th level as a druid, and there was one of those in the entire world. Second ed had really bad ideas.
Yeah.
There's very much.
Or sorry, no, it was 18th level. There was only one of them, and 18th level was the highest you could ever be as a druid.
Yeah.
I think it was like 12th level actually when the cap started, but it was there was a certain point where you stopped being able to actually advance in levels as a druid until one of the druids that was higher ranked than you
So you
died.
took a trip back to the
I was
Druid
gonna
Enclave
say-
and someone had a suspicious death.
Yeah, I was
Exactly.
going to say, until you go hunting druids.
Yep, basically.
So, yeah, it all boiled down to mechanics as basically buff and world building, which is not the best of ideas when you're actually trying to make a game for people to fucking play.
No.
But yeah. All right.
It's also if you were an elf, because I think elves were the only ones that could go past like 14th level as a druid.
Yep. The metal album cover.
Yeah.
I mean, campaigns chapter. Seriously, seriously, if death metal just started right now, I wouldn't be surprised.
It's just a Diablo Necromancer.
Pretty much.
Okay, as an aside, this book does much better on art than the Player's Handbook did, by the way.
I mean, all you-
Just-
Very low bar there.
All
Yeah.
you really need to do is extend the handle of the mace down out of frame, and then replace the very top of the mic, and you're golden.
yeah, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it does better than the PHB as far as art, but again, that's because the PHB has 130 pages of powers with no actual artwork in them.
That's basically the
There's
issue
literally
with it.
one piece of artwork at the start of each class, and then no other artwork for the entire class.
There's like one little thing like this one right here on the page, somewhere buried usually in the Paragon Paths,
Paragon
and that's about
area,
it.
yeah.
Yeah. But yeah. In any case, this chapter, again, the advice here is solid for starting new DM, so instead, let's talk about higher levels and a bit of the cognitive load I'm going to have right now. But first, we'll start with wealth by levels to get that out of the way. So wealth by level in the system is magic item level. You have a magic item of your level +1, a magic item of your level, and a magic item of your level -1, and money equal to a magic item of your level -1, regardless of your level. That's actually a positive. That's much better than
Yeah, it's a really good design that way, rather than just being like they have this flat amount based on what level they are, and let them just go on a shopping spree.
on a table that's on page like 158 in the DM's guide, which is nowhere in any section you would expect it
Correct.
to be. And nowhere else. Yeah. So, now back to that cognitive load rant, because I didn't actually do this in the player's handbook, because we had enough shit to go over already. So, relevant combat actions just at level 1. You have not even counting much built in. 2 at-will powers, 1 encounter, 1 daily, 1 racial, and
Unless you're a
your
dwarf.
unless you're a dwarf, in which case you just have a better second wind, or a human, which technically just has an at-will.
Yeah.
Later on, they actually have an encounter power as a choice, but it's between one and the other. But that's for later. But yeah,
This is the typical block.
but yeah, a typical character is going to have 6 abilities that they more or less just chose themselves, in addition to just the base align abilities in the system. This isn't even me counting the move actions, because there is technically move and shift. There's also charge, which is its own action, which we didn't go over at all, but that is you do a move up to your, as a standard action, do a move up to your speed in a straight line, do a basic melee attack. In any case, at level 11, you now have 2 at-will powers, 4 encounter powers, 3 dailies, 3 utility powers, a racial, and your second win, so it comes up to like 14. And at 26 onward, really, you have 2 at-wills, 4 encounter, 4 daily, 7 utilities, 1 racial, and a second wind, and a partridge in a fucking pear tree. You have 19 goddamn different things to choose from on your turn, on every turn. And this doesn't include actions you get from magic items, actions you get from feats, which are sort of opt-in, actions you would actually get from your class, because there's also absolutely other encounter powers and sometimes at-will powers you'll get from your class.
Channel divinity, etc.
etc. And yeah, there's various amounts of opt-in on those, or Hunter's Quarry, all the mark abilities as well.
Yeah.
Granted, those are more straightforward at least, but yeah.
Often it's writers too.
Oh, and those also build with levels as well. And there's no opt-out or simplification in this. This is just the base fucking level. So the cognitive load here starts pretty high for a new player. I'm giving them like 6 different abilities. Even if they have chosen them, they have 6 different abilities on every round of combat for just their standard action. And then it just builds to fucking ridiculous levels for any human being on the planet. I have 19 goddamn abilities. What the hell are you insane?
Yeah, at its core level, I mean, you will hear me complain about it, and I won't not complain about it because it is what it is. But like, I always complain about like, especially 3.035 until certain points, until certain books were released. Martial characters were fucking boring. You didn't have a whole lot of options in a round. Your action every single round of combat was, I swing my sword. Maybe I swing my sword 2, 3, 4 times. Yeah. That's it. That's all it is. But, fourth ed, one of the things I praise it for is like, okay, they actually gave options to martial characters. You actually have choices you make in each round of combat. You're not just always doing the same thing over and over again. But it does come at the expense of there's no good, easy entry point for a new player. Fighters were a great entry point for a new player into D&D in previous editions, and honestly, kind of in 5th edition. They're sort of back to that. They're still a little bit more complicated and more interesting than they were in older editions, but they're still back to a very basic thing, because all you really have to understand is, this is my weapon stats, this is the number I need to roll, they add together, things work. It was a really good entry point and made it really easy to learn. The 4th edition has its benefits in that it is no harder to learn any class than it is to learn any other class. But by that same token, it is no easier to learn any class than it is any other class. You are expected to always come into the game fully expected to learn, like Vince said, at base 6 powers plus any other random options. Where if you choose like wizard, you have to know all the like cantrips, or you choose ranger, you have to know when you should be using your hunter's mark, kind of shit. Yeah. Like there is, I think the barrier of entry is lower on average across all classes, but higher in general.
And that in of itself is still kind of a problem, because you want a low barrier of entry. The biggest problem is like, I also want to run a fighter after I absolutely know the system, and like in 3.5. That is a lot of finding my own fun and complexity to some extent with like feats and whatnot, which still almost always boils down to a character that's rolling dice in order to
the ceiling is much lower in 4th as well, because there's not as much you can do with a character.
No,
it's actually why
because what you do with a character in 4th is what you do with every character in 4th.
It's actually why I was really terrified when we were initially doing the playtest stuff for what eventually became 5th edition. Some of the very early playtests felt extremely limiting as far as character creation.
Yeah. It doesn't help the fact that levels 1 through 3 are basically the tutorial levels in 5th ed, so you do come out with just some things really are like practically everyone is fighter or a fighter with a little bit of extra stuff, or even the spellcasters have like,
you have your attack cantrip, and that's what you're using every turn.
Basically.
Like,
and you have like
a few
2
spells.
first level spells.
Yeah.
Like all the pads.
Yeah, this actually does wrap around to the comment that was made with the PhD of the kind of MMOification of the system. This is very much a thing. Very early MMOs, or very early levels in MMOs. Only have a few powers to start.
Everyone's about the same. You have your attack power and maybe a much harder attack that's on a cooldown.
And yet, when you get to max level, button bloat just. I've got 30 abilities to figure out what I'm doing when.
I'm going to be honest with you. I've never touched half the buttons I have as Sage.
Yeah, I would say you're not playing it properly, but you're getting the job done. So obviously,
those
other people are doing something weird.
It's also kind of the evolution of MMORPGs, because you look back at EverQuest, it's absolutely more on the side of like what fighter or what the
kick and taunt.
Yeah, kick and taunt. Yeah, for the entirety of their existence.
That's all you did.
Yep.
Technically, you had like 6 or 7 buttons, but I couldn't tell you what I ended up doing. Like,
kick and taunt's all you use.
So there was an MMO I played for a short while that I think actually got this concept correct. The original Guild Wars, the most you ever had as active skills was 8.
Yep.
So you had to, like, if you got new abilities, you had to pick what you were removing or decide not to use that new ability, which honestly, yeah, for MMOs, kind of, I think, a better system.
Just think about the concept of your character being just kick and taunt.
Uh-huh.
You're tanking a big raid boss.
Uh-huh.
This fight takes 45 minutes.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
All you are doing
All
for the
you
entire
have
45 minutes
is
are kick and taunt.
Your
Makes it real
job could
simple.
your job could be done by a drink keeper.
Yep.
There are no ads to grab.
I mean, in fairness, Vince, I know you don't
There
play
is no
FF14.
defensive cooldowns to activate.
There was a very long time where my primary class was Bard. My job could also be done by a drinky bird.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, getting back on this topic for a bit, or at least to the realm of RPGs, it also kind of creates an inherent problem of like, I want to run fighter. I want fighter to be more complex. How do we insert more complex into fighter? Other than calling it like Warblade, and I suddenly go grab Book of Nine Swords. 5th edition kind of helps with that in the sense that you have subclasses, and if you don't want the complex fighter because
You play champion.
you play champion. Then
Or even to a certain extent, Battle Master, which is slightly more complicated, but barely.
I mean, it's definitely more complicated.
It is definitely more
than Champion,
complicated.
Which is
No, it's more
Just
complicated.
passive
It's
abilities
more
for the most
complicated than Champion, but it is certainly not on the level of like Eldritch Knight or
no. The spellcasting is definitely the most complex thing you can do in 5th edition, but is way toned down actually for like
Yes.
35.
Yeah.
You don't anywhere near have as many spell choices, and honestly, each level you're going to only have certain choices that you're going to make as options anyways.
Yeah.
So it's not even
But-
though you end up with like 20 some odd, and it also includes all of your non-combat stuff.
Yeah.
but that's for another time when we
Yeah.
discuss 5th ed.
Yeah, exactly.
Once 6th ed comes out and we can justify calling 5th ed in hindsight.
There we go. Technically, we do 2014 in hindsight.
We could do 2014.
in hindsight.
But yeah, in any case, as far as cognitive load in 4th edition, I think this is actually its biggest problem. Especially when you start to get to higher levels and actually try and figure out what the fuck you're actually going to do on your turn. If you are a very contemplative person, this creates a lot of analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
Let's see. The world! All right, let's get into the fluffy bits. So, welcome to the Points of Light / Nentir Veil cosmology, as it became known as later. It's actually what the designers called it. So, the basic idea here is the world is old, civilizations have risen and fallen. Don't worry about it. And what has happened before will happen again. Civilization is a light in the darkness that burns bright, then goes out. Basically, cities pop up, cities fall. A lot. Over a very long period of time, and it's just kind of always happened. And the player characters are special, and the world purposely lacks full details in order for you to do whatever the fuck you want. It's very much like 3.5, but actually taken to an even more degree. Whereas 3.5 was, well, they called it Greyhawk with the number or with the serial numbers filed off. It was just fucking Greyhawk. It's Greyhawk, and we didn't give you a map. That's really all it came down to. And this just kind of takes it a bit. 4th Ed takes that even a bit further and kind of starts to design its own stuff. And or pulls stuff from Forgotten Realms, but don't worry about it. Starting with the cosmology, which is the Great Wheel is just gone. Instead, this is what the cosmology looks like. Above the material plane is the Astral Sea, the land of souls and home to the gods, both good and naughty, except when it isn't, including the 9 hells. Well, I word that poorly, but yeah. Some gods aren't actually in the Astral Sea, like the Raven Queen is actually in the Shadowfell, and Loth is in the Demon Web pits way down in the Abyss, which is in the Elemental Chaos. And yeah, below is the Elemental Chaos that was ruled by the Primordials, who forged the world and then got pwned in the Dawn War. Currently, they are some combination of dead, shackled, and the occasional free one, but mostly the first 2 categories. And in the middle is the material world and its two reflections, the Feywild and the Shadowfell. Basically, the naturey side and the deathy side. Let's see. Okay, so now off to the monster manual for a bit. So after the Primordials created the material world, the gods introduced mortals to it, which upset the Primordials who did not want this chocolate in their peanut butter, and war ensued, which they lost and they were shackled or something. We'll go into it in later details. It's covered later in different books. So, going through things in the monster manual, we have abominations in the monster manual, which are reflavored as just living weapons of both the gods and primordials. This category was originally in the epic level handbook. We now go to level 30, so technically they're all over level. There are like 20 plus monsters, so they are all technically in the epic levels. It's just this game was actually designed to go to 30, so yeah. And it now includes the Tarusk, which actually makes sense with the fluff they remade here. A living weapon, as the Tarusk itself is basically a world cracker. So, angels in this edition, now servants of the gods, and all of them, good, evil, and who the fuck cares, and gods alike, have angels, and can now be so they can now be of any alignment, and are much easier to throw at player characters regardless of plot. This is very much a theme in this edition. You'll find a lot of monsters that were like player characters. You'd have to like work a little bit hard for player characters, plot wise, for player characters to be fighting these things. Yeah, no, not anywhere near as much in this edition. Archons have exactly nothing in common with the previous edition Archons. So Archons of 4th edition are the servants of primordials that live in the elemental chaos. They are elemental creatures in humanoid shapes. They were created basically to be the armies of the primordials in the Dawn War. They are all chaotic evil like their masters and wish to earn the world to primordial rule. Let's see. Demons! So long before the war between the gods and the primordials, a god wanted it all, found in the cosmos the shard of evil, which drove him mad, and he plunged into the depths of the elemental chaos, forming the abyss and corrupting some of the primordials, aka the demon lords of previous editions, Demogorgon, Baphomet, Orcus, and others. Not all of them Oberths, or we'll get over this, or we'll get to this when we talk about the Demonomicon. But in any case, that mad god tried to use the demons to wage war, but failed because they're demons, and they just said "fuck you." So instead, he used he used elemental forces, lost, and got chained up. And we'll talk about him more later. You've also heard of him before.
Could be anyone.
Yep. The demons themselves have pretty much the same motivations, give or take, as in previous editions, including not limited to basically just destroying everything. But again, we'll talk about more of their fluff when we get to Demonomicon. Of note, however, in 4th edition, demons all kind of have an animalistic theme, which also means that succubi are no longer demons and are instead devils. So the Nine Hells looks the same as the last edition. See our Fiendish Codex 2 Tyrants of the Nine Hells video for more on that. But Asmodeus has a very different origin now, probably. Anything when it comes to Asmodeus's origin is questionable in every edition. Don't think about it too hard. And in this edition, however, he is a god. Asmodeus started out as a general of a lawful good god who ruled Beator, whose name Asmodeus has made sure is lost. Asmodeus became brutal in his war against the primordials and was stripped of his rank and beauty. Then the gods' forces started losing battles, and Asmodeus took that opportunity to slay him. However, for that act, as his final act, the god cursed Asmodeus and his followers for doing so, which is the origin of all the devils. Notably, the Nine Hells, because of how the cosmology works here, is not a lower plane. It is in the upper planes, up in the astral sea with all the other gods. Let's see. Dragons! There's only chromatic in this book, but it describes the others. So there's catastrophic dragons, which are primordial things, but not evil, but they are embodiments of destruction. So yeah. Metallic dragons are not always good, and we'll get into that later. They are, however, followers of Bahamut, and there's more of that when we get into basically the 4th ed lore video, which will be later in this series. Planar dragons are dragons that reflect the planes that they come from. We actually went over quite a few of these. The 3.5 Draconomicon. And Scourge dragons, which are even more evil or something. So dragons now have precisely two gods that were formed when their creator deity Io was split into two by a primordial, and those two are Bahamut and Tiamat, the good and the evil dragon god, basically. Also notable, 4th edition still really has a very strong art game. As a matter of fact, sometimes more so than 3.5.
I'm pretty sure this is just the 3.5 art.
No, because these are unique for this book.
I'm pretty Draconomicon Red Dragon.
No, I've stared enough at the Draconomicon. No, I'm pretty sure these pieces were actually unique for fourth edition's book. Now, granted, there is a lot of 3.5 art that does get reused. I have noticed various pieces of 3.5, but I do not think these were in the Draconomicon. I could absolutely be wrong, but I do not remember them being in there. Also, that Red Dragon was my desktop for quite a while.
It's fair. Fantastic piece of work.
Yeah, I especially love just how it actually gives us a scale of a elder dragon there, where the trees are just basically
Yeah.
shrubbery in the back in the foreground.
Yeah.
Let's see, but yeah. Also, other bits in this book to go over real quick. Elementals are still unaligned, but now are much more chaotic and interesting in appearance. I actually just prefer these elementals to the basic bitch ones we usually have. I mean, just look at them.
Those are just warlock pets.
Yeah, but still. It's better than the vaguely humanoid shaped blob of fire or water that they had in previous editions. So yeah, fall spawn up there at the top right are what happens when you visit the far realm that lies outside the elemental chaos and astral sea. Aberrant creatures like illithids and whatnot still basically kind of have origins tied to the far realm, more so in this edition. Let's see, giants were created by primordials and were created and used by primordials, but now they're actually free agents, so they're not particularly at war with anyone other than each other.
I mean, it's
anymore than
similar
each other.
design, but I don't think that specific piece of artwork.
I mean, there's more than that one.
Yeah.
Ultimately, not really that.
No, it really isn't. But yeah. Also, Orcus is in this book. We the previous monster manuals, you didn't generally find unique characters per se. Like Orcus was in Hordes of the Abyss, but not in. You didn't find like specific name characters other than like the Taurosk in the monster manuals. Also in here is larva mages, which they're worms that walks. This one even mentions mentions in its lore blurb Kethus. And let's see. Also, Slad now are straight up just chaotic evil agents of entropy who claim to be older than the cosmos. Straight chaos is no longer in alignment, so it does make sense that they'd have a different one. And chaotic evil is probably the most appropriate, honestly, for how they behave. Also, Warforged make an appearance in this book, which I found interesting. And finally, in the back, you actually have non-core races. All of the rules you need to actually run them as players with no level adjustments, because that was always dumb, and fourth edition is its own racial formula that's divorced from monster design, so level adjustment is not even a thing, and isn't needed, because it's just basically, here's this template, you follow it, monster good, or base race good. And yeah, this increases the player choices for PC races from 8 to 24 without even leaving the core or 3 books, which was actually nice. It was one of the, and it was also just good for character building, because it's just more stat combinations in order to actually try and make a character work, as well as just different at will powers. And this is absolutely a too small font for anyone to read.
It also lets you
it's
play
not really
Kobold.
the
This is garbage.
Yeah.
yes, it lets you play Kobold.
They
It isn't
have
garbage.
absolutely fantastic rifle build.
Yes. We'll actually talk about them later, strangely enough, because there is an interesting thing in a later book. Probably next week, actually. Yeah. And so back to the DM's guide. The rest of the world chapter. So yeah, you know that Shade God from earlier? That's none other than Zadoom, who is mostly known as the Elder Elemental Eye, who has popped up before in various other books that we've actually talked about before, who wants to, unbeknownst to most of his worshippers, be free so he can just destroy the cosmos. Very few people who learned that second detail actually
worship him.
Yeah. So go figure. Also, artifacts are here and take up a page and a fucking half each, because they all have like personalities and can sometimes leave you. They are very much the relics of gods, etc., and even more so. And oh god, they made them way more mechanically complex. And this chapter has a page talking about languages, just what other things speak, etc., I put that there more as a note than anything, but they took up an entire page on it, which it was fair, actually. But it's more fluff, but it's not terribly worth going too deep into. Right. So DM's Toolbox. Yeah, so there's a section all about building monsters and such. But yeah, also there's templates in this section. which you may wonder how the hell that works in 4th edition without actual level adjustments. Also, talk about monster stat blocks here. So, legitimately, one of the 4th edition's best improvements was the condensed monster stat block, which is laid out with usage in mind and condensed to just its important bits. I mean, yeah, there's like a basic bitch goblin. It's so simple, straightforward, and just get everything there. Like at the top is even just its actions. Like here's its defenses, here's its speed, here's its action, the bonuses it gets, the damage it does. My only gripe is I actually would like to have average damage, so I can just roll a d20 and be done with it. That's something that 5th edition does. But yeah, as far as templates themselves they don't actually adjust monster level, obviously, or they don't even adjust the monster's level. Instead, one template upgrades a standard monster to an elite, or an elite monster to solo, with the asterisk of you also double its hit points and add +5 to its saving throws when it becomes a solo encounter. And 2 of them can upgrade a standard to a solo, and you do the same thing extra. It's a simple and straightforward way of making templates work. So I actually quite like that well enough too. It lets you basically upgrade anything to an elite solo if you really want to. Yeah. It also means they have to make far less elites and solos for.
You actually just turn whatever you want. Slap it to it.
Yeah. Which is good because they again, because of the scaling thing, they have to make a shit ton more monster entries and blocks than they normally would have to. All right. And also creating monsters. So again, monsters are no longer effectively created the same way as player characters, and now have some handy streamlined tables to create stats that are relatively in the ballpark of where they should be, and makes it a lot quicker for the DM to just make his own monster, assuming you're not just taking a stat block and crossing off the name and writing in whatever the fuck you want. You could very much easily find something that's probably close enough in concept to what you wanted anyways, but if you're just doing it from scratch, this is fairly helpful. The simplicity also it makes it a lot easier to improvise and not have to do a bunch of work. These are tables I very much appreciate as someone who tends to more often than not just create his own monsters for whatever the hell he's doing, or has, because I sometimes come up with weird concepts and or various other things. Let's see. And house rules. So first and foremost, as I will keep restating, everyone plays with house rules, even when they think they don't. Also, the first rule of intentional house rules is playing around with making crits better or fumbles worse is a bad idea. Just don't. Just don't. It never fucking comes out well. I have never played with a crit or fumble table that has not made me want to beat my head against a wall. They are easily the they easily result in like the swingiest nonsense that just tends to come out bad. I don't know. Yes. Also, random dungeon tiles. I don't hate this idea, but seriously, just get a stack of dungeon tiles and some sort of randomizer. You don't have to like make a dice table for this.
Yeah. A stack of dungeon tiles, mix them up, grab them randomly.
Yeah.
Alternatively, spend a long time planning out a large dungeon, and then when you go to rebuild it later on, somehow shift things to spaces spatially. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, that occasionally happens. But yeah, also remember to place the important tiles in relatively specific spots with a bit of variance, like the boss room in the bottom 5 tiles, and not, shuffled entirely into the entire pile randomly so it shows up as the first room.
I mean, it's fine.
Fork at the bottom of a pile so it leads to 2 other piles, etc. Stuff like that.
And I think it'd be interesting if a dungeon you go in the first room is the boss room. You basically have to do a panic flight deeper into the dungeon to escape.
Yeah, like the entrance seals.
Yeah. That's more purposeful design than random dungeon tiles, though, but yeah.
No, that's just what you have to do on the fly. Get random dungeon tiles and start from the boss room.
Yeah, that's true enough. Also, random encounters, because sometimes the DM needs to say, fuck it, we dice, to figure out what the party encounters. Unfortunately, this is a bit focused on general build, so you have to fetch your own monsters for this, making the random encounter take longer to create on the spot.
Yeah, it doesn't give you a specific monster. It gives you you should have this, like this many of this type of monster.
Yeah, it's strangely enough one of the places where like 3.5 has probably done it better. I'm using quotation marks here than 4th Ed when it comes to its random tables. Because at least it's like, okay, and then they encounter like 8 goblins.
Yeah, 8
and-
goblins.
Yeah.
A billet.
Yeah.
A surprisingly often amount of time, a billet.
All right, the Fall Crest chapter. So this chapter is all about this town and the surrounding area, akin to the Saltmarsh chapter and 3.5's Dungeon Master's Guide 2. So going into details kind of defeats the purpose of the chapter. But one thing of note, Nethervale, the region that Fallcrest is in, is 5th edition. Well, not necessarily 5th edition and more research, but it is actually the name for the points of light cosmology that the designers used. Much like how Ravenloft is the book title for the Demiplate of Dread, which in this edition, by the way, is off the Shadowfell. Let's see. And finally, the back of the book. Books. Don't worry about it. So this book is great for a starting DM, even if you don't plan on running 4th edition, though mechanical knowledge of it will help a little when translating it to your system of choice, honestly. But if you're just looking for DM advice and it's kind of lacking in whatever game you're going to be running and you're just a new DM, this isn't actually a bad one to just look over. Especially if it's more along the line of like fantasy dungeon crawl that DM is or D&D is roughly themed towards. But even if it's something radically different, the advice here is pretty solid in a lot of sections. Also, this is one of the better monster manuals in edition, honestly. Its only real flaw is how many monster stat blocks there has to be because of the system it's in. It's literally its biggest flaw is that it's in the 4th edition system, and you have to create a billion stat blocks in order to
You have to create a level 1 goblin and a level 5 goblin and a level 12 goblin and
yeah.
All the way up to 30 now.
Yep.
And you can't just make one goblin and say at level 5 add these numbers, at level 10 add these numbers. Even though in a lot of cases that's effectively what they did, but felt the need to make an entirely separate stat block for it.
Yeah.
They're trying to codify everything into a nice, neat stat block. It makes sense to do nice, neat stat blocks all the way up, even if it is just like add 2 to these numbers.
It's just something that at the very least, because I brought it up before, that 2024 rules 5th ed did the same conceptually, but executed it a lot better.
Yeah. Because effectively monsters are much more usable over every level.
Monsters are much more usable than ever, but they also do things like, for if you're looking for like a bandit, there's like 3 bandit profiles for 2024. It's like bandit captain, bandit this.
Yeah.
Over the course of like usually somewhere from like starting level like 1 through 3 CR, going up to somewhere around like 10 to 12 CR.
Yeah.
And they're not like human bandit, goblin bandit, whatever. It's a bandit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You make up whatever race you want. The race stuff doesn't matter.
It is kind of nice and flavorful. They have like if there was specific racial traits, that's the only minor gripe I have there. But like,
yeah, but those are also easy enough to slot in. Like if it's a drow bandit, you just go, hey, they also have these spells at will because that's what drow do.
Yeah, or if they're a kobold bandit, they have like pack tactics or something.
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah.
It's easy enough, especially if you're an experienced DM. If you're an experienced enough DM that kind of thing actually matters to you for the design, it's easy enough for you to just go, oh, I can grab pack tactics off of this thing and just slot that into the stat block here.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be too terribly unbalanced any more so than CR is already a joke in 5th ed.
Yeah.
Look, just because there's a CR1 monster that has 3 attacks at like a +8.
And a fucking 19 AC.
19
Yeah.
AC. It's made of paper mache, so if you hit it, it probably dies.
It has like 12 HP, but a 19 AC, so
But
you're not going to fucking
You're not going to hit it very well level 1, and it will just murder people.
Yeah. You basically have to rely on saves in order to that thing. Yeah.
But
and
anyways,
not dexterity saves.
Yeah.
And not dexterity saves. Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, so that's the rest of the core books of 4th edition. So now we have a pretty basic understanding of how 4th edition operates as a system and the way that it's intended to be played and run.
Yeah.
So next week, we'll be going into a little bit more of how it grew over its time.
Yeah. We will be starting with Player's Handbook 2, but we're not staying there, and we're going to probably cover about 7 books, honestly.
Just a lot of the different character option stuff, essentially.
Yes. We're skipping around to basically all the interesting bits in the various power books and a very special book at the end.
Yep. So hopefully you'll join us for that. In the meantime, though, we're going to go ahead and call it here for today's episode of In Hindsight. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll be back with Sound Goblin Story Time as we continue our playthrough of Paranormasites. I hope to see you then. Until then, I've been Bograt.
Jim.
And I'm Vincent.
Have a good
Other
one,
people
y'all.
walked away from the table. Yep, have a good one.